Hello everyone, I am Lisa with Lisa Capen Quilts. I'm so glad you've joined me today. We're in the office talking about one of the most frequent questions that I get asked on a weekly basis. How do you charge for a quilt? You've been asked to make a quilt and you're not quite sure where to start. So today we're going to be talking about the economics of making a quilt. We're in the office and we have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. I have heard from so many of you, and it's kind of amazing that even though we are all different, our stories always sound familiar or similar. So the messages often sound like this: I've been quilting for X amount of time and love to make quilts. I've never made one and sold one. A coworker has asked me how much would I charge them to make a quilt, and can you help me? So I thought in today's video I would share with you how I have developed a system for pricing my work, and just let you know that what my prices look like are going to be totally different than your pricing, and we're going to go over to some of the reasons why that is in today's video. You know, the reality of it is that unless you sew or you deal with fabrics, or you've been a quilter and made a quilt, more than likely you do not know how much material cost goes into making a quilt, and you don't know how much time is involved in making that quilt. And so keep that in mind when you are coming up with a pricing system for you, is that most of the time your prices are going to be a lot different than what your coworker has in mind when they asked you that question. More than likely, you know, most people, when they think of quilts, they think of the quilt they saw hanging in a Cracker Barrel, or the quilt in a bag at Walmart that comes with shams and matching bed skirts. And those are the prices that they have preconceived, and it is not their fault. So when there's a surprise element involved when you present your prices, keep that in mind. I really think that as the artist or the creator of the quilt, and this really goes for any genre of skills, trades, and crafting across the board, it is really your responsibility to educate your client into why your price is this way, because most people, they just don't know. And certainly it can be a little bit of a sticker price shock. So a brief little history about me as a quilter, in case this is the first time you're joining in any of my videos. I started quilting in 1999, and I am a self-taught quilter, teaching myself from books that were given to me by my great aunt, who was a lifetime quilter. I spent years and years and years and years, and really only started quilting for hire, or my quilting business, until, let's see, 3 years ago. So what I'm going to share with you in today's video, and the information I'm sharing, really comes from what I've developed, and it could be different from you. You could modify this information, but these are all things that you really should consider when pricing a quilt. So with all of that preconceived things out there, let's get started with how to price your quilt. One of the very first things I think we need to consider when setting up a price system for your quilts is really the area in which you live. We all live in different economical regions, and our prices are going to look different because of that. You know, I could make a queen size, a beautiful quilt and sell it for X amount of dollars where I live. I could take that same quilt several states away and sell it easily for 2 or 3 times higher. I could also take this quilt and bring it to another state away and never be able to sell that quilt because it is just too expensive. So the area in which we live really sets a baseline of what we can make a living at or make a quilt for. So consider that. One great way to find out a ballpark price range to start at would be visit some craft fairs, some local markets, some craft shows, and get a baseline price or a ballpark in which maybe you could start at. And it might be that you have to adjust your pricing. Maybe your pricing is too high and you need to figure out ways to lower the cost. Or maybe your pricing could be raised a little. It's all going to be based in the area in which we live. And then we get more into the facts and numbers behind pricing our quilt. Now we are going to start talking about some numbers and doing a little bit of math. So just to let you know, and I'm going to put a close-up of what this looks like right here, which might be easier to see than this. I made up this PDF that just really helped me formulate a price that works for me. And so all of the numbers that we're going to talk about today are adjustable to you and what you have access to and in your area. You can download this PDF. It's going to be in the description box of this video. It just brings you over to my Dropbox, and it's just a one-page PDF. And so that's what we're going to use today to formulate a price. And for today's video, we're going to imagine that we've been asked to make a twin-size quilt. So let's take the measurements of a quilt that measures 72 inches wide by 90 inches long, and those are the dimensions that we're going to work together to formulate a price. So go ahead, download and print off one of these copies, and you can follow along with us today. You might even save this and be able to use it as a tool to help you in the future pricing your quilts. Okay, we have our little sheet, and we're going to work off of this side here to formulate a cost for your quilt. And we're going to start talking by the fabric cost, or the cost of materials that it's going to require to make this twin size quilt. I'll start by saying that we're going to use a ballpark or an average pricing range for today's quilt. These prices are going to vary depending on what's available to you and in your area. I am very lucky that I have a Joann's Fabric about 5 minutes away from my house. I have a local quilt shop about 15 minutes away, and I have a Walmart less than 2 minutes away that still carries fabric. So I have some local, very quick, accessible places to buy materials. And we all have online where we can shop different brands and stores easily online as well. So I have all of these options, and certainly I have found very nice quality fabrics and materials at all 3 places. With some experience, you can certainly find quality fabrics and goods for your quilts at all different types of places, and you can do that on a budget. So, saying that, we're going to just put an average cost of fabric at $12 a yard. I have found quality fabric for way less than that, and I have paid way more than that for a yard of fabric. But for today's video, we're going to say $12, and I don't think that that is unreasonable a price to put on a yard of fabric. So let's figure out the cost of this quilt top. For a quilt that measures 72 inches by 90 inches, I think it is fair to say that you would need at least 6 yards of fabric, and that's taking into consideration wasting fabric as we cut out our pieces, or it could be more than 6 yards if we're buying multiple colors or patterns and doing different patchwork or applique. You know, there's so many variations, but we're going to say 6 yards for the top at $12 a yard. That's going to give us a ballpark price of $72 for the quilt top. Okay, so $72. Next, we'll talk about the batting. It could be different, but an average ballpark price for a batting for a twin size quilt would be $24.99. Okay, so let's say $24.99 on top of our $72. The next thing we're going to consider is the quilt backing, and we're going to need at least 6 yards to do the back. 6 yards at $12 a yard is another $72. And then we consider the binding fabric, and we'll need about 5/8 of a yard to do our quilt, and that gives us about $9. So if you add all of that up, we come up to a total of material cost of $177.99. Now, that is not including the cost of our thread. Maybe we are replacing the needle. Maybe we're using fusibles or interfacing. All other variables that go into constructing your top are on top of the material cost, the body of our quilt. So those are all things that make up the material cost. And so this little PDF is going to break that down for you. I'm sorry, I'm looking down at my sheet. You got a line for the quilt top yardage, a line for your batting, backing, binding, and thread. Okay, those are your basic things. You might have to pencil in any extra things that you use to construct your quilt top. So right now for this twin size quilt, we are at $177.99. So what else do we need to consider in pricing this quilt? So now we are at $177.99 for our twin size quilts. The next thing we need to consider is the quilting charge, or how much is it going to cost to finish this quilt. And it might be that you're going to quilt the quilt yourself. How much thread and needle and time is involved in that. It might be that you're going to tie the quilt. Again, how much material and time is involved. And it might be that you're going to send your quilt off to a long armor. And how much will you pay that person to quilt your quilt for you? Let's say we're going to send our twin size quilt off to a long armor, and they charge 15 cents a square inch to quilt our quilt for us. This is where all of our prices start to vary, because that could look different depending on where you are at. Average price 15 cents for our quilt brings us to $97.20. So we're going to take that $97.20 and add it to our material cost, and we come up to $275.19. So that's where we are currently. Okay, now we are at $275.19 for our quilt. This whole next section on the PDF we are going to skip for today's video, because we could always add upgrades, and there's options of ways to increase the value of what you're going to charge for your quilt. You could customize your quilt. You could do embroidery by machine or by hand. You could add embellishments. You could add quilt tags and labels, and there's all different kinds of ways to increase the price of the quilt. We're going to keep it simple today, and we're going to skip all of those options. The next thing we're going to talk about is the labor cost. And again, this is another subject of where it's going to start adding some differences in what I charge and what you charge. When I started quilting in 99, I was very entry level, and I have learned a lot to where I am now. Certainly, I could not charge what I charge now back then at different experience levels. And it's taken some confidence and some sweat equity into myself and my business to feel comfortable to charge what I charge now. Certainly, I do not want to stay here. I think we should always be growing and improving and feeling confident in our abilities as a creator to charge more. So the amount we're going to charge for labor is going to look different. You know, I find it interesting. I did a Google search on the internet the other day, and I typed in what is the average entry-level wage per hour for a skilled trade. And so I'm going to be looking down here for a second, but for an electronics technician, the entry-level wage per hour average is $15.88. For a project scheduler, and I'm not quite sure what that is, but I sound like a project scheduler, their average entry-level wage per hour is $40 an hour. Mind you, that's where they started, and they're going up from there. I would love to make $40 an hour. Wouldn't that be awesome? You know, that's my life goal, is to, you know, find where I can charge that if that ever happens. But for today's video, we're going to come in and say $15 an hour is what I'm going to charge to make this twin size quilt. Let's just say it's going to take me 20 hours to make this quilt. Again, all of this is going to vary to you, but 20 hours for our twin size quilt at $15 an hour is $300 for the labor cost. So if we add $300 to the $275.19 of materials and quilting, we come to a grand total, are you ready, of $575.19. That is a lot of money. That's a lot of money for a twin size quilt. And that's going to sound a lot of money, like a lot of money, to your coworker who asked you if you could make a quilt for them. Because remember, most, on average, people think of quilt pricing of the beautiful quilt they saw on Cracker Barrel that was $79 for a king size quilt. And now we're going to talk about $575 for a twin size quilt. So you can see the sticker shock, and rightfully so. That is a lot of money. So how do you take all of these different prices and guidelines and adjust that to what works for you? So that's what we're going to talk about next. So now we have formulated a simple quilt price for this twin size quilt, coming up to $575.19. And you can see how I just wrote in the totals right there. Now we're going to talk about the second half of this PDF and what really worked for me because of all of the variables. And we're not just talking about material cost. We're talking about different sizes of quilts, right? We're talking about patchwork or scrappy quilts versus memory quilts made out of clothing. So there's all these different variables, and I make a ton of t-shirt quilts. Matter of fact, most of the quilts that I get commissioned for are t-shirt quilts. Now, Keep all of this in mind when formulating your price. You might not be spending $177 on making the quilt top because you've been given all of these t-shirts, right? Or clothes to cut up to put into a quilt. So your material cost might be different, but what are you investing in? You're investing in stabilizer, deboning the clothes, cutting the clothes apart, figuring out which parts of the clothes you're going to use and not use. You're taking the time to add the stabilizer to the clothing and to cut usable pieces of fabric from these clothing. So all of that needs to be considered in the pricing of your quilt. So all of those variables and all the different sizes of quilts there are, I needed a way for myself to be able to answer quickly when someone contacts me, how much do you charge for a quilt? So I went across the board and I said, you know what? I'm going to make 3 different price guides. I'm going to start off with an easy quilt. You'll see that right up here, easy, and all of these slots. Then I'm going to figure out a mid-level. You know, maybe they want a t-shirt quilt, but they want sashing and cornerstones or a border. What are my fees for that? And then I formulated a difficult category, and this is like where my collage style quilts would come in. You know, the quilts that are going to take a lot more time involved, a lot more thought process, a lot more planning, a lot more materials. I went through each one of these sections to formulate a price across the board for easy, medium, and hard quilts. And so for me, now when someone contacts me through Facebook Messenger and says, can you make a full-size t-shirt quilt for me? What is your price? I like to be able to respond to that customer quickly and give them a ballpark. Of course, there's things that you could do to upgrade that price, but let's give them a ballpark figure and respond to the client in a timely manner. So what you'll find on this section of the PDF is a graph where you can map out your entry-level quilt prices for each size that you want to offer, and maybe break your quilts up to easy, mid-level, and difficult. And maybe that will help you out in determining prices for your quilts. Now, if you have any questions at any time, I'm always here to try to help you. And again, our prices are going to be different. And I certainly wish that there was someone out there that could have helped me 3 years ago when I was trying to formulate my prices, but it's really trial and error. And one thing that you're going to notice is that you're going to be asked a lot if you decide to go into making quilts on commission, what your prices are. I give out prices, you know, I get a lot of inquiries about making quilts, and once they hear my price, I don't hear back from about 95% of them. And I feel bad, but I also feel like that's okay. There are several quilters in my area, and I feel like there's enough quilting work to go around to all of us. And my prices might be higher or might be lower than the other quilters in my area, but I'm doing what works for me and what can sustain my small little business. Certainly, if you do the math and the method that I showed you today, adding up your cost and your labor and different things like that, and keeping in mind your economics of the area that you live in, it won't take you long to figure out that to make a very cushy living at making quilts, you're going to have to make quite a few quilts in a month. And how many quilts can you make in a month? And how much time is involved? How much time do you have to invest in that? And so those are all things to consider when you go to think about making quilts on commission. Now, I hope that I have not been too confusing. The $575 for a twin size quilt sounds ginormous to me. But how much is your skills really worth? And to some people, that's a lot of money, and you might not ever get that quilt commission. And to some other people, after telling them about all the materials and time involved and skills that it takes to make that quilt, they're going to appreciate all of that and have no problem paying $575 for an investment in you and a one-of-a-kind handcrafted piece from you. So, again, if you have any questions, I'd love to help. You can join me on Facebook. I'll put a link to my Facebook below. It's Lisa Capen Quilts, and through there I have a really fun group of people, and we share everything from quilting to journaling, all kinds of different genres of crafting and creating. And so I would love it if you join me there as well. And I'll put a link to my Etsy shop if you are interested in any patterns, journal kits, journals. I have a lot of fun different things over there that you can check out, and that link will be in the description box as well. I hope that I did not make this too confusing. And again, all of this is going to be different based on where you live and your skills and equipment that you have. So many variables. And so that is why, if you have asked me in the past if I could help you with their price, my answer has been long-winded, and at the end I did not give you a price to quote, because your price is going to be different than mine. Okay, I am off to head out to the shop to start sewing, and I hope you have a fantastic day. If you have not already subscribed, I would love to have you join along in my quilting journey, and I feel like we have come together to form an awesome community, not only here on YouTube, but over on Facebook as well, and I would love to hear from you. So say hello. Bye, everybody.